So it's probably going to end up in Holly's.
I was gonna
recordings.
say, yeah, we
Folder,
learned last time. I don't know if that's something I can change to make it so that anybody, I mean, I guess it has to go somewhere when there's a recording, so someone has to be the owner, and I don't mind being that, but if I'm out, I don't want for everyone to not have access to the recording.
Yeah, maybe if you could spend just like 5 minutes looking into it. Maybe IT help could make sure that we get this meeting set up correctly. Because I think it'd be great if we could rotate responsibility for who uploads to Unfiltered.
I'll look into it and let you all know.
Like, we could just do the recording manually. So instead of uploading to the cloud, we record it locally and then manually upload after the fact, because then it would record to my computer.
That makes sense.
Yeah, whatever works. I can accommodate. I just can't help if when I hit record, it says ask for permission. And then when I look for it, I can't find it. So I'm absolutely zero help.
Yeah, I don't know how to give permission either, or whoever the first person would be, if it's somebody else.
Well, I think I tried it last week and I had created the original Zoom and it said I didn't have permission. So I think whoever comes in first is the person.
Except I was in first today.
You were in first today?
Yeah.
Well, that's even weirder. I don't know.
I don't think so.
No, you beat me?
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe it is.
Weird.
All right, well, we'll test it again next week. Daniel's still going to be the king of recording, I suppose.
Thanks, Daniel. And I'll share, I'll put it on Unfiltered as soon as it's done processing.
Cool. Well, I'll jump into my agenda item. I was hoping to get some design feedback from y'all. So I wanted to at least show how this feature works today, to give context of why I think another iteration on this feature would be useful. In the security and compliance tab, when you're in a group, you can go to the compliance dashboard, and today it's only showing you the most recent merge request for each project within that group. I don't think it shows projects that are in subgroups. I think it's just for ones in that root group. But there's a button that's not so much tied to what's in this table. So this button allows you to take out these merge commits into a CSV file. And you could even look for specific merge commit SHA. And so that's all you can do with it. It's useful because there are auditors that will ask for specific data that relates to a specific commit, and you'll have to go in and find that data. So without having this functionality, you have to go look for the merge request, then look for those specific attributes within a merge request that have that commit SHA, which can be kind of just hard to discover. But I don't really love the fact that this button has kind of nothing to do with this other than these are merge requests and these are merge commits. So what I was aspiring to do was create a dedicated page that has that CSV data in it, essentially. There's a separate tab for merge request violations, which is what we're currently building. So to the screenshot to the left of it, that's what that dashboard is going to turn into. So this would be more about merge requests that have made compliance violations. And then the one next to it would be what's known in the industry as a commit custody report. So this is how you can see who handled specific commits, what the outcome of the pipeline was from that commit, so on and so forth, what project it associates with. We heard from a specific customer that they will like divvy up the responsibility to investigate commits. So they'll say, all right, person A, you got these 30 commits, person B, you got these 30 commits, and now you got to go find all this data. So to me, like ideally, they'd be able to enter in their commit SHAs into like a filter bar and be able to pull back the ones they care about. My concern though is I keep running into this wall with like performance issues because it's so much data that we run into a lot of database query issues. So I was trying to go with even a lower fidelity result, like not even creating the table for it, but at least showing, hey, this is like the type of data you're getting, because today you're not even, you just have to create the file first to then even discover what data are you getting, because it's just a guess from here. So at least trying to show a preview of what that CSV file could look like, and then trying to give a way for you to still be able to get all those commits or be able to pick a specific one, or ideally be able to do batch, maybe separated by a comma. And I don't know, I was just having a hard time figuring out a way to make like those two buttons like coexist nicely on the same page without, I don't know, feeling like it's too confusing. So I was toying with some different ideas here. I was curious if maybe one of them stood out to you as maybe making more sense than another one. But yeah, all this right now looks more high fidelity than it should be, but it was just easier to piece it all together in this format.
Good
think
exploration. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the problem you might have with the trying to generate the data is going to be just the nature of it, and so just minimize or just take that out of the equation entirely. The other two versions you had on the far right seemed more logical, I guess. But the thing that I'm like trying to understand is that at some point you're going to have to do a query.
Yeah, and the query today is fine for, so we kind of like offload the service and it runs and pulls it back once and puts it in a file for you and sends it to you in your browser. So this is already happening today. Like I can hit export and it's going to save to my computer. I think the issue is, and we haven't been able to fully validate it yet because backend hasn't really looked into it. But when you're trying to actually pull the data results back into a table, potentially even one that you can do sorting or filtering on, it might not be performant, where we don't have those same performance constraints for just like creating a file.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not positive. Ideally, if like backend's like, yeah, we can do a table and we can filter by specific commits, then like, great, yeah, we can go that way because I can then tie the export button to what the table is showing. So if we're showing all the commits, then you can grab all of them. Or if you look up a specific one, then we could export that specific commit number or that list of them. I think my concern is if they say we can't do that, I'm like, all right, well, now I gotta come up with some other way to still give you the two buttons. I don't really love how the specific commit is like buried in a drop down box. Like, I don't really love this. Not very discoverable. So
Yeah, we had
I guess where I was looking for feedback on is like, what do you all think about the specific areas of getting all of them versus like a single commit or a batch of them?
What's the primary use case? What's the
Hard to say. Like maybe if it's a smaller organization, they might just get all of the commits. But if it's a really big one, they probably are going to go after specific ones.
Is there a case that you could set where it would be beneficial to both, but maybe even if it's more beneficial to one versus the other, both can benefit from that scenario? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, if they can, people are going to grab all of the data because it gives them the most flexibility.
Right.
People love pulling out data, throwing it in Excel, creating their pivot tables and being able to sort and find data that way. But like the specific task of being able to find a batch of specific commits, that's going to be specific to organizations that have to do that.
That's what I was thinking, is that it would just be a single case of downloading the whole thing and let them figure it out with whatever tool like Excel or any sort of database they would have with it.
That's kind of what I'm thinking too, because for MVC, it seems like you can offer everything and then let them filter it out and then learn from there if they need to have the option to drill in a little bit more. I'm glad you're doing this though. That button feels very odd to me. And I'm curious if it's just me, but it says list of all merge commits and it doesn't feel like that's what happens when you click it. It downloads a list, correct? Like I would almost expect when I click that for it to somehow filter or change this view, but it's an export. And the icon helps with that, but from an accessibility standpoint, you may not necessarily get that, although we do have the tooltip, so that helps. But But yeah, I'm glad you're revisiting the button as a
It-
whole, just because
it
that
could
was
be
something I got
improved for
stuck on
sure.
initially.
Yeah, no, it is confusing. I mean, the functionality exists for both, and we did hear from customers that they did like the ability to find specific commits. I'll
Sure.
acknowledge that actually one of the biggest technical constraints we have on this right now is it's only the merge commit. So
Mhm.
it's not like all the commits you see in a merge request. It's just like the commit that merged the change, which we've already heard is not enough. But the problem is it's getting all that data is a problematic backend problem. So
So
I guess that's a separate issue for a separate day, but yeah.
is it a bigger problem then to get all of the data or to get a portion of the data filtered out from a performance perspective?
Well, I think it's two separate things. It is a problem to get all commit data versus just the merge commits data. Then on top of that, it's easier to just find a specific commit versus all of them, but it all depends on how big things are. So we're expressing there's a file limitation of 15 megabytes, which isn't like super helpful because how much is 15 megabytes? You probably have no idea how much your group has of data in it, but
Or why that matters. They may not know that either.
yeah, I think what we communicate in docs is that it's going to truncate your file after you reach that limit. So we'll give it to you, but just know there might be truncation if you get everything. So you're a really big organization, you've existed for a really long time, potentially it's going to be far more than you possibly would want.
Mhm.
It seems weird. Like it's going to start truncating data that feels problematic.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like less than ideal, but we're at least trying to acknowledge the constraints of what we're working with. I think this happens in other areas too. I may, if Alexis was here, she might be able to speak more to how it works when you export issues. But I think at some point you might even experience truncation there, depending on how big things are. I'm not positive though. But yeah, I think I was trying to keep the same functionality. So still being able to export all of your commits, all of your merge commits to a CSV or grab a specific one. And I wasn't really sure how I should delineate that with buttons or illustrations or ways to help make that more obvious. So my initial idea was to have a button specific for all the commits and then a button specific for picking a commit. This would bring up a modal dialog, which you could then search for the things you're looking for. Probably very similar to what this is showing here.
And you
If you look for something that's like not valid, it won't show up. But if you do search for something valid, then it will turn green. So then you can actually download it.
How would you know what to enter in that field?
So it's, well, you would know from a merge request the commit ID. So an example, we could look at a specific merge request. And you can pull the commit SHA from there. What the one customer was describing to us was they have like a collection of commits that they want their compliance team to investigate. So they have just like a list of them that they've had someone go and audit. And then they're like, we've flagged these for more investigation, essentially.
Because the reason I asked is I'm wondering if you could merge the two things together instead of creating a new feature.
Are you saying merge the all commits and a specific commit or merge requests and commit SHAs?
Because they're all merge requests and they have something called a commit SHA in them, correct?
Yeah, this is the commit SHA.
Right. So that's just a piece of data from the larger item, which is a commit. So it feels a little clumsy, like it's too specific.
But that's kind of, so the other commits in this merge request could be totally fine. They're trying to look specifically just for a specific commits data. They want to know that Ben did this commit versus the administrator who did this commit. Because even though administrator did this whole merge request, Ben's responsible for adding a new row and column, which maybe the way they went about injecting that code into the code base was not good, whatever that good means.
I see.
So in an audit perspective, they need to be able to drill specifically to who commits the change, which is why the commit SHA is more useful than the merge request itself, because the merge request is everything. The commit SHA is who did specific actions and what was their outcome.
Right, I see. I'm just trying to think of a way you can repackage the data, right? So either start large and not worry so much about the specificity, but if the specificity is the issue in content or in the issue that's up for discussion or needs to be analyzed, then perhaps you can't really re-architect it that way. It has to be that specific. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear what you're saying. Like, is there a better way to portray this data without having to over complement?
Just to get access to it. So like if you go back to the drop down button, which is bizarre, like it's list of all, and then this is drop down thing. Like this goes back to the hidden drop down buttons
that
we had worked on before. Like they shouldn't be hidden. They're two different things anyways.
I agree.
So,
but also it shouldn't even be on this page, because like this page is showing you merge requests that have essentially violations. Ideally, has nothing to do with specific commits, which is more for like probably more of an auditing perspective.
So in the audit events tab.
No, not no. I could go down that train, but it would diverge the conversation.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I'm trying to think of what would make it more logical to put in here. Would just renaming it make it more logical to be in here? Would actually changing the architecture or the behavior of the button, like instead of this merge commit, export commit, custody report button, if it did something else entirely? Then I guess
well, I think users
trying to do here.
I think the users like the functionality. The problem is, one, it's only merge commits, not being able to, like, I can't go find this commit. Let me see. I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, it couldn't find it. So it just brings back nothing, I guess. I think it knows it's a commit, but it's not a merge commit. So the problem would be they can't find the specific commits they care about. So really that needs to be tackled first, but I don't like the UX of it in general. So even if you could find your specific commit you're looking for, I don't really like it.
So what is the primary problem you're trying to address here from a usability perspective?
I want users to better be able to identify that these features are not tied together. And I want them to better understand the data that they'll be getting before they commit to a decision, just so they can quickly identify things. Like, for example, I had to put in that commit information and try and get the file and then open the file before I even knew if it was what I wanted. So I would love to be able to just have entered in that commit number here, and then it showed me that data and go, great, this is exactly what I'm looking for, export my file, I know where this needs to go. Or even just being able to know like what data comes in the file would be great before I hit export.
I think that's like the thing that we should try and go for. Like that seems like the MVC, not the CSV file. So I think the first question I would have would be to ask the backend team, how can we make this data searchable without crashing the system? Is that possible? If not, then we'll have to reevaluate.
Yep, I think that's where I'm sitting. Like, I think this would be great if backend says we're cool with that, but maybe if it's not, trying to explore a way to use illustration or more details on the page to provide that context in the page, but still keeping the functionality so users can at least still do the same actions, but maybe making it more clear so I'm not tucking everything behind a drop down, I guess, No, modal's not the right term for this. Flyout,
No, no,
maybe?
Popover?
Pop over? I don't know what we would call this in pajamas. I don't think this exists necessarily in pajamas.
I
I don't
think
know how we
it's
make
kind of a
this.
popover because it's not something that's activated on hover and it doesn't go away when you mouse off, but it's
Yeah.
activated by click and remains until you click to remove, I think. At what point does the performance problem come into play? Is it when you try to load all of those on the page or when you try to actually do an export?
I think it's when you try and load them on the page.
Okay. Because I was looking at how we do it with issues, and issues you do have, if you're just exporting a list of issues, it does have obviously everything on the list view already. But when you go to do the export, it does this email process and says, we're building this list and we'll email you when it's done, which seems like a good way to try to manage some of the performance from that perspective, but not from the loading perspective. I think we have definitely at least been talking about doing infinite scroll for the issue list. Though we haven't moved, I don't think, toward that just yet. Let me be sure. Yeah, it's still pagination. But that's something I know Gabe really wants, and we've been looking into the pros and cons of the different kinds of pagination and loading for that. So I don't know if that helps in exploring this or not.
Yeah, I think at least what I've heard from you both that it reinforces the concept that I need to move away from this drop-down button UI and at least expose it as equally weighted actions for now. And then look for ways to improve presenting the data as is performant to our requirements. But so I guess I'll take it from there.
Let us know how it goes.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I plan on opening an issue today to get some more feedback from engineering. It's like one of those cases where it's like, I don't really feel like there needs to be a ton of solution validation per se. It's more just we haven't built out the user experience that we wanted because we had some limitations on the data side. So trying to explore, can we maybe push that boundary a little bit further to make a better, clear UI?
Yeah,
that's the hope.
Okay.
Cool. I think that was all I had, and I guess that was the only bullet on the agenda. Any last minute requests?
I have started working on so if you saw my UX showcase last week, we have this large project, which we have now started to try to scale down a little bit. But what's come out of it for me in particular is we have this feature object that we're looking to create, and I'm going to be working to make it mobile friendly first. So I've started doing a competitor analysis. And this is, I guess, really more of a question since we only have a couple of minutes left, but I've been looking at all three of our big competitors, not all three of our only big competitors. It's Jira, Asana, and Monday.com, and they all redirect you when you go to the website on a mobile device to use the app. And the apps all have amazing reviews. And I've been going through and testing in all of them. And they're all really good experiences from the perspective of creating and managing issues and sort of tracking your workflow. My theory is that initially I thought we have a complex process, and so people may not want to use it on a mobile device, or potentially our particular experience is just not very good on a mobile device. So maybe that's part of the problem. But having seen how they've kind of separated it out, it makes me think that it's not so much the process, but how it's presented in a mobile environment. And that's why they are moving everything to an app perspective. So my question out of all of that is related to the fact that I'm testing their apps from a competitor perspective, even though I know we're looking to offer a mobile web experience. And I know that there will be pros and cons to a native app that we won't have as part of our mobile web portal. But any concerns, anything that you all can think of that I might need to keep in mind in addition to that when exploring this app as a competitor or these apps versus the mobile web?
Well, I think the first thing off the top of my head was when you mentioned that the scope of the problem or the scope of the features that we offer in comparison,
Mhm.
right? So obviously, if we try and do that in an app experience, it would be totally not the same at all, right? It would be something
Right.
entirely different. And so comparing them in that aspect doesn't necessarily make sense. But then
Mhm.
it also goes back to what I was saying about how the scope of them. What's the projects that people are using for these apps? The ones that they have rave reviews on everything, right? Are they using it for like checking one thing? And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't necessarily make any sense either as a comparative because it's not the right thing, right?
Mhm.
It's not really a logical comparison. And so I would say comparing the mobile app experience versus our experience for this kind of problem doesn't necessarily feel accurate, despite it just foundationally saying, oh yeah, it's the same thing to some capacity, right?
Mhm. I think that's a great point. That was kind of the concern I had. However, the specific use cases that I'm looking at are viewing an issue, creating an issue, editing an issue, and viewing a list of issues. So right now I'm just kind of looking at the flows that they've established, considering, because I know enough about development to know, this is definitely native functionality and device functionality that we wouldn't have
Right.
access to, but still kind of exploring how they're problem solving this. But some of the feedback that I've seen from their users is that they so like the mobile experience that they're willing to potentially leave the desktop experience altogether to do this kind of work, which I was really fascinated over because, again, I thought the flow would be so complex that people wouldn't want to do that. But potentially now it seems that it is a complex flow, but when you try to just transfer it to a mobile environment from the desktop, it still feels complex. But if you can customize it and sort of streamline it to just be that mobile experience only, and have it tailored to fit that environment, then maybe it's a better experience. I'd like
But
to
that's
understand a
something
bit more about
that I
why.
don't think if you defined, well, as you described it, it doesn't sound like a complex experience at all, actually. If you're only talking about an issue viewer and reply and comment, you're talking about email, you're talking about a chat app.
Great point. Yeah,
So
that's true.
if you say, let me distill this whole experience down to an email or a chat messaging system and remove all the features that we have, like labels and milestones and all this other stuff, it's like, nope, because all it is the viewer, chat, respond, comment, emojis.
Well, we would still have all of the meta information and the ability to edit it, but the way that they are presenting it, at least in the cases I've seen so far, has been pretty simple. I know we're over, and Austin, you were about to say something. So if you want to maybe close this out, you're welcome to with that comment.
Yeah. My subjective opinion on it is I think we try and take everything from our full desktop experience and put it in a 375 width screen.
Yeah.
And that's just not realistic.
Agreed.
Like you're saying, like ideally, a user using a mobile device, are we doing something probably more lightweight? So for example, when you're editing a comment, maybe not squeezing the whole WYSIWYG editor into the screen and just letting them write just straight into the text box, or maybe like Daniel was saying, maybe not showing every label. Maybe we hide all labels when you're on the desktop or the mobile experience. I would say trying to reduce could be very helpful in those ways, because like you said, when people are on their phones, they're probably doing just communication for the most part. They're probably not writing the code. At least I'm not. Also, from my experience with other teams, no one uses GitLab to like the density that we write into it. So the task of actually communicating back and forth in GitLab for other teams is probably a lot less. Like
it's more of a user story format.
Right. Yep. Like the description is usually really short. There are not usually really long threads going on in the issues. That's something very unique to us because we so heavily focus on the async portion of our work.
Right.
So for other teams, just being able to go in and comment and tag people is like probably all they need. So as much as you can reduce and clutter, I think that would be best. I don't know if we really ever talked about that with foundations of like, yes, we try and make buttons the right touch size, which is great. I love that we have all these components, but as we start compressing the viewport, we don't talk about removing elements. We just try and keep all the elements present and find a new way to like finagle them around, but maybe some should disappear, maybe some new ones should appear to fit the context of that screen.
That's a great point. I have a checklist item in my research issue to evaluate what we have currently in place in relation to mobile in pajamas and talk with the team. So that's a great point. I think a progressive disclosure approach could be a good way to go, just to like, what can we show initially that's going to provide value, and then what can we kind of hide away? And again, that's some of the stuff that I'm finding through the competitor analysis research, is how they're doing that, kind of hiding things away until you need it. But anyway, this has been really helpful. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Austin, for sharing today about your compliance work. That was very cool, and looking forward to seeing what comes from it.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. I'll keep you in the loop.
Have a great day, everyone. See ya.
Bye.